All right, so some of the biggest news in the crypto markets today, of course, has been revealed, and that is the SEC and potentially their loss against the Grayscale Trust. We're going to break all that down for you guys. You're going to love it today. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into TechPath. Back in the studio here today, so we're really, and probably a good time to be back here in the studio. A couple of things happening. Of course, you can kind of see the tweet right here. Just in, crypto asset manager Grayscale wins their lawsuit against the SEC. And there's a few things that you could look at. I'll jump over to a tweet right here from James Seifert. I've read through the digested this a bit. This is a complete another rebuke of all the SEC's spot Bitcoin ETF denial orders. There is no wiggle room. Basically, all of the SEC's arguments were shot down, but the decision is going to go back to the SEC, and what can the SEC do? I'll break this down a little bit. Mainly what we're talking about here, this was, I think, a 3-0 defeat for the SEC. This looks really bad for Gary Gensler. This, along with what he's seen already with losses, what we're seeing in terms of pressure, in terms of the regulatory front, and just in general, the political baggage that he is now becoming for the Democrats and also, I think, for the SEC. We'll play a little bit and get into that more around what this might look like. I want to jump over to a couple of videos for you. Let's play this clip right here just to give you guys a nice idea of where this might go.
How big of a decision is this on Grayscale?
It's massive. This has been a years-long pursuit for Grayscale. Remember, it has been fighting the SEC's decision, and now it has the courts in their favor. If you look at the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, this is the main entity that would face a conversion. This is one of the longest-standing, largest trusts holding Bitcoin, in which retail and institutional investors have been able to gain exposure for many, many years now. You are looking at discount to net asset value really narrowing here. At this very moment, it stands at about 24% under its net asset value, but that is expected to narrow as they get closer to the ETF conversion, which has really become a main thesis for investing in this fund. And beyond that, as you're saying, there is a whole host of other ETF filings in the pipeline, and this is boding well for those firms. I will also say that in addition to the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust finding some love on the heels of this decision, you are also seeing Bitcoin itself up above 27,000. It's almost 5% jump in the market right now, because the idea here is that by a potential conversion here for the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust into an ETF, it could draw massive adoption from financial advisors, retail investors. Think about how much money on the side.
All right, so I'm gonna pause it there. Mainly, the scenario playing out on this is I'm a little bit more on the fence that the impact is really going to come from BlackRock more so than GBTC and Grayscale. Obviously, Grayscale will have to refile as an ETF to basically align with what is most likely going to, compare to what's already been filed by many other respondents that have already put a filing into the SEC. And I think the other factor that plays into this, remember she mentioned there the ratio in which the underlying asset versus the discount that is there, 24%. I'm still questioning whether or not Grayscale ever converts to a true spot ETF. This is a very interesting time. We'll see if it happens. Obviously, if we start to see a big run on just spot ETFs, including, I think, BlackRock will most likely be first. That, I think, is going to be the bigger play going forward. I want to jump over to a couple more tweets here. This was James Seifert, of course. We've had James on the show before. Brutal quote from Rao. The commissions explained discounting for the obvious financial and mathematical relationship between the spot and futures market falls short of the standard for reasoning and decision-making. This, to me, reasoned decision-making. I think this, to me, is more and more, and if you look further into it, it goes all the way down in here. You can even reference some additional case files that they talk about with Manx versus DHS. It would be presumably arbitrary and capricious to ignore these facts. So this, again, almost every point that Grayscale was making on, for them, this is a really huge win. And I think obviously the markets have responded almost 7-8% on Bitcoin on the day. Will we see more movement here on Bitcoin? I think there is a possibility for that slightly to see some movement. I think the real potential here now is still BlackRock, but this also sets up an interesting factor because many people look at BlackRock, and including myself, and I think, well, is that going to give us an interesting pump to where Bitcoin starts to break through that 32K mark? Because that's kind of been that annual high right here for this year. I think that is the big factor that everybody's looking at. Here was a tweet coming in from Jake Cinsky. This is the attorney over at the Blockchain Association. He had a couple of things that I thought were very interesting to break down. DC Circuit soundly rejected the SEC's view on the ETF. Proposal is not designed to prevent fraudulent and manipulative acts and practices. The SEC has spent a full decade denying spot Bitcoin ETF proposals under this reasoning. That's now over. So that's a huge statement. So what's the SEC going to do? Here's a few theories. One theory is the SEC will just pick a different reason to deny. That's a very good possibility. Will Chair Gensler really accept this loss? I think this may be one of those things where he is now scrambling to keep his job. This guy is starting to lose major, and this is not typical of the SEC, so they're basically picking the wrong fights. Another theory is that the SEC will take the DC court's decision as a semi-graceful exit from their anti-ETF position. Maybe. That would be kind of the more cosmetic view for the political frontier, I think. And it could possibly be the route that the SEC does take here. Further into this, he goes, this isn't just about Grayscale, it's all of TradFi, which is ready for Bitcoin ETFs. Many other issuers have proposed ETFs this year, including BlackRock. Larry Fink throws heavy punches in DC. That is the bigger picture here. I think BlackRock is still the one that gets approved first. Now, do they do kind of a culminative approval around all of these ETFs who are coming up on a deadline here just in a few days? And what that might mean, if we are looking at this, there's going to be a lot of winners. Obviously, the one winner that is going to be happening out there is Coinbase and also Bitcoin. But the other factor that's going to play into this is, I think, Ethereum. And we'll get into a little bit of what that might look like. And we'll also take a look at some of the charts here. The last point Jake wanted to make is I have no doubt we'll get a spot ETF sooner or later. The only question is if the SEC wants to make this more painful for itself. And again, I don't know that this is one of those scenarios that Gensler would want to be more painful than it is right now. He's already lost in the Ripple case. He's lost here. Most likely going to lose in the Coinbase case. Things are looking pretty dire for the SEC. Here was John Deaton. Thought this was interesting. The arbitrary and capricious standard is a very high and difficult standard to meet. Why is it so difficult to meet? Because all the SEC has to do is provide reasonable, coherent explanation as to why it denied the spot ETF. And they're not. So is it just they don't understand it, or are they truly, I just don't get it. These are smart people. Why are they not able to really make their case of why? And for a judge to be able to slam all of these down, surely these are expert litigators out there that should be able to understand where and how the judge is most likely going to rule. That to me is a big deal. Here was Elio Trades kind of hitting on the point of, hey, we got BlackRock, Hong Kong, Chinese stimulus, major global conflicts, obviously, and de-dollarization. Backdrop for crypto, never been like this before. I would agree. I think that the scenarios, and I've talked about this before here on the show and in many interviews, is that there are a lot of factors here that have never existed in the past cycle. So we are in for a very, very interesting time, even going into this next halving. I think a lot of this is going to be very interesting to watch. Let's listen to what Squawk Box said, because this is now making it into mainstream media, which is another major factor that a lot of people have never seen. You never saw this in 2021. You never saw this in 2017. Listen to what they had to say here.
Well, they're totally involved in crypto. I mean, there are blue chip names that, I mean, BlackRock now. I mean, there are a couple other I'm not thinking about. It's amazing, and I don't know what it says necessarily. Do you think there'll be an ETF, spot ETF?
I hope there will be. You know, I think it's better for the institutional and individual investor. You know, you're getting a real NAV at that particular moment in time. I think that's better for all of us. I hope that happens. But, you know, in terms of the BlackRocks of the world, the Fidelities of the world being involved with crypto, you know, whether you're crazy about it or not, it's probably going to be a significant part of our future. If I'm running a brokerage firm and we're not involved with crypto, and that becomes a significant part of our future down the road, it's already pretty important now. You know, we're going to get hurt badly by not being there. So
I hope it's not.
All right, so hurt badly by not being there. I would agree with that. This is kind of a little comical, but I think it also represents with the current scenario around financial media and what's happening out there. But the point is that mainstream media is and now on top of this. This is pretty huge. And just in the sense that you have to remember, there's a lot of people that are not like you, listening in, watching, and liking this video right now, that understand where crypto is going. In many cases, there are so many people that are coming to this for the very first time. They maybe have just now heard of Bitcoin. There are a lot of people that are looking at this and say it's not a legitimate asset class. I'm not going to put money into it. And that's including a lot of investors that typically go to the S&P or maybe go to traditional mutual funds. All those kind of things are now starting to shift. The technology is there, the regulation is coming, and now you have the support of the institutional class. Lots of things changing here in a big way. Here was another story right here. BlackRock, I just want to kind of jump to it. BlackRock is shareholder in these 5 major companies holding Bitcoin. You guys know these, of course. Tesla, PayPal, not as much. PayPal, obviously, with PayPal US, their own stablecoin. Block, of course, we already know what Jack Dorsey is doing over there. Coinbase is going to absolutely become a star in this next market. And then obviously MicroStrategy, one of the largest Bitcoin holders out there on the planet. You look at all that, and then you look at this tweet from Dylan LeClaire. BlackRock is passively buying up publicly miners for their index funds on behalf of clients. They aren't actively buying miners to flip them at profit for their own books. So this is another scenario that plays into this. Riot, of course, Marathon, Cypher. Hut 8's not in the play here, but TerraWolf. TerraWolf we've had on the show before. Riot, of course, Marathon, big percentages directly from BlackRock. So again, more indicators that this is coming. And the real question is, what plays on a more accelerated groundwork? Do you look at Bitcoin as the play here? I think we're going to see a nice pump and likely a little bit of a slow recovery, and then waiting for a potential, and this could anywhere between 15 and 20% if we see a BlackRock ETF filing. The real question will be is how does it weather through the rest of the macro environment? That's the bigger one. You also look at the macro environment and other players that are starting to move into this space. Now you've got X, formerly Twitter, is now licensed to store, transfer, and exchange Bitcoin and other digital assets for its users. This is going down the line that Elon, I think, has been considering for quite some time. Again, the technology has got to be able to handle this, and that's the other aspect that I think is still questionable around the Lightning Network and where that might be going. Hence why I'm really leaning in on ETH and do like that as a major asset. Doesn't mean I won't trade Bitcoin, because there's always a trade on a speculative asset such as Bitcoin, and also in things like Coinbase. Look at Coinbase's stock right now, up right here, almost 15% on the day. And this is on the 4-hour cycle right now. And if you look at Coinbase, I mean, it's had a nice downtrend for a potential purchase if you are interested in investing, secondarily into this market, and you just look at the future. Think of what Coinbase is going to do. If I go to the daily, let's go to the weekly, actually. I want to go to the weekly. And we'll squeeze this in and give you guys a little bit of a look at Coinbase over time. Let's go all the way back to where it was really up here after its IPO. And then I think this was the more level point, which is around the 200 mark. This goes all the way back into March. And this, to me, is an interesting space because it's kind of had this general channel right here. And one of the things that are starting to break out that has not occurred during this period of time was regulation and also institutional finance. And obviously the Bitcoin ETFs playing into this. If you look at Bitcoin, obviously up right now, almost 7% on the day. This will be a question mark as to whether or not we can hold around this $28,000 mark right now. This will be the next layer of potentially clipping into around 29.3 and up. Real question again, I think, is the ETF. And again, if you guys are not following our channel, this is the time to do it because things are about to get very, very active. Whether it is the SEC continuing to push off these decisions on spot ETFs, trying to figure out a way to save face from this absolute just dismantling from the judges on the Grayscale case, or if we see something else as a strategy. All of this means volatility in the market, and when there's volatility, there's some opportunity. We're going to, of course, be covering that in depth for you guys. It's going to be a good one. If you're not part of our Diamond Circle, make sure and jump in right now. It's one of the best places to catch additional content, podcast, research. I do some additional analysis over there for you guys. I'm probably going to do a breakdown of this later tonight that will be out there for our Diamond Circle. So make sure and subscribe. Just click that link down below. And of course, if you are not following me on Twitter, make sure and catch me out there. It's just @PaulBaron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.